Now we come to the Mahanama Sutta.
Recording in progress.
And this particular sutta, the purpose why I want to discuss this is because one of the things that you will have noticed as we go along with this is the importance of the idea of joy and happiness on the path. And one of the difficulties in the practice is how to give rise to that joy and happiness. Yeah, and this sutta is really all about that. How do we add a sense of inspiration and joy and gladness in our practice? And as we do that, if we can learn to do that, then we are solving one of those tricky aspects of the path. And it will teach us a lot about how the path works at the same time. So let us see what this sutta has to say. This is called with Mahanama. I've read this out before on various retreats, but it's a beautiful little sutta about how to develop these things. So at one time, the Buddha was staying in the land of the Sakyans, near Kapilavatthu in the Banyan Tree Monastery, the Nigrodharama. This is the home country of the Buddha. And Kapilavatthu, of course, is the capital city or the main town of that area. Then Mahanama the Sakyan, who was a cousin of the Buddha, went up to the Buddha, bowed and sat down to one side and said to him, "Sir, when a noble disciple has reached a fruit and understood the instructions, what kind of meditation do they frequently practice? Or what kind of contemplation do they frequently do?" And so here he said, one who has reached a fruit and understood the instruction. Basically, this means someone who is a stream enterer, someone who has insight into the teachings. How should they practice? What kind of practices should they do? And now perhaps you will think that, well, this is too high. I'm not a stream enterer, so how can I practice this? But according to the suttas, this is a kind of instruction, a kind of practice we should all do. Everyone should do this. It is just that for the stream enterer, it is more powerful and more effective, but actually it pertains to everyone. So let's see what the Buddha has to say. Mahanama, when a noble disciple has reached a fruit and understood the instructions, they frequently practice this kind of meditation. Firstly, a noble disciple recollects the realized one, the Buddha. That blessed one is perfected, a fully awakened Buddha, accomplished in knowledge and conduct, holy, a knower of the world, supreme guide for those who wish to train, teacher of gods and humans, awakened, blessed. This is the famous Iti Piso verse that we see everywhere in the suttas. When a noble disciple recollects the Buddha, their mind is not full of greed, hate, and delusion. At that time, their mind is unswerving, based on the Buddha, the realized one. A noble disciple whose mind is unswerving finds inspiration, inspiration in the meaning and the teaching, and they find joy connected with the teaching. When they're joyful, rapture springs up. When the mind is full of rapture, the body becomes tranquil. When the body is tranquil, they feel bliss. And when they're blissful, the mind becomes stilled in samadhi. This is called a noble disciple who lives in balance among a people who are unbalanced, who lives untroubled among people who are troubled. They have entered the stream of the teaching and develop the recollection of the Buddha. So you can see the idea here, how this works. The idea is that you take up a certain contemplation which has the ability to inspire you, to give rise to joy. And once that joy has arisen, you will notice that it is exactly the same sequence that we saw before. Very similar kind of sequence, The idea of joy, and then the rapture, and then the tranquility, and then the bliss, and then the samadhi. This is a very similar sequence to what we saw just earlier. But this gives you the means how to get that sequence started. How do we actually gain this kind of joy? How do we get this meditation to become blissful, not just peaceful? And the way to do that then is to recollect the Buddha, to remember the qualities of the Buddha. And this particular verse here, this Itipiso verse, Itipiso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vijja Charana Sampanno Sugato Loka Vidu Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sarati Satta Deva Manusanang Buddho Bhagava. This particular verse in the Pali, which many of you will know by heart because it's very common in the Theravada tradition, it actually is very beautiful and very powerful. And there's so many aspects to this idea of the Buddha. Sometimes we need to bring out what it really is about. And I don't have time to talk about this verse. This verse really requires an hour's talk in its own right. And I have talked about this many times before. But maybe just some of the ideas here about the Buddha. The idea that he is accomplished in knowledge and conduct, for example. What is that knowledge? Well, it is the knowledge of suffering and happiness. The Buddha is accomplished in knowledge in the sense that he knows where real happiness is to be found and where suffering is to be found. He knows where we should direct our minds and where we should direct our minds away from. He has understood the human predicament, the human situation. He knows where we are going wrong. He knows we are blind. We are doing things that lead to suffering even though we want to be happy. He has the knowledge of awakening, which understands real happiness and where to find it. So this is kind of the idea of the vijja, the understanding of reality, which also includes things like, of course, rebirth and all of that. But the main idea is the idea of happiness and suffering here. But of course, the Buddha is not just that. The Buddha also has the conduct, right? He behaves according to that insight and understanding. And the idea here is that if you have a certain knowledge, if you see the world in a certain way, it changes you as a human being. You become different. Your psychological makeup is transformed. You become kind to the very root of your person. You can no longer do any bad things. You have destroyed greed, hatred, and delusion. They are no longer there. They can no longer infiltrate your mind. And so your conduct is in accordance with that. Your conduct is in accordance with the ideas of metta, loving kindness, compassion, karuna, the opposite of harmfulness, and with the idea of being renunciate, not being greedy, having the clarity of the mind, the wisdom to understand the nature of reality. This is very powerful because it means that when we can actually see, to some extent, we can see who is more likely than others to have gone a long way on the path because they have more of these qualities. And sometimes you will see some dodgy characters, some scallywags in the world, some pretending to be enlightened, but enjoying lots of Rolls Royces and all kinds of relationships and all kinds of dodgy stuff. And they get angry sometimes with the disciples, and this is not the real deal. These people haven't really understood anything because they have defilements. The conduct does not match their insight. So the Buddha has all of these things. He is holy, he is a knower of the world, the supreme guide of those who wish to train. Why is he the supreme guide? Because he has the insight, the understanding. He knows where happiness is to be found. He knows what everyone in the world actually wants. We all want to reduce our problems, to find more satisfaction and contentment and real, deep, meaningful joy and happiness. That's what everyone wants in the whole world. This is kind of an obvious thing in life. So he knows exactly what it is that we want. He knows how to get there. He knows the path there. And not only that, but because he is not driven by any kind of self-interest, he is coming from compassion, purely from compassion. There's no vested interest for the Buddha. He doesn't gain anything by having more disciples. He doesn't want anything in the world. He doesn't want any money. He wants to renounce everything. And he actually does not want these things. He would prefer just to be by himself. But he accepts a certain degree of suffering and pain in his own life so that he can be compassionate. It's almost like an anti-vested interest in doing what he does. So this is very powerful, yeah, the peak of wisdom and compassion. When he acts in the world, it's purely out of compassion, no other vested interest. And that makes you listen to the word of the Buddha with much more care, because you know this is a person who has your best interest at heart. All he wants is to look after you, to help you, to support you. So when you read the suttas, you listen. What is this trying to say here? You try to use your mind to carefully reflect on these teachings, because you know that there's something very powerful going on here. The path to real happiness, what everyone ever wants, coming from the supremely compassionate being. Every word he says comes because of compassion. So this is how to reflect on this, yeah? The teacher of gods and humans have this idea about the Buddha. What is it like to meet the Buddha? I often try to think, what is it like to meet the Buddha? And what it is like to meet the Buddha is like this idea of meeting someone where you feel completely accepted, where you feel that there is no judgment at all. You can be completely relaxed and at ease in the company because you know they will never judge you. They will always be kind towards you. And sometimes they will give you a simple teaching. The Buddha is not going to give you a complicated teaching you cannot understand. The Buddha is not going to tell you the 12 links of dependent origination and exactly how it works. The Buddha is going to teach you something that you can be useful for you. He's going to tell you, be kind, be compassionate, yeah, be generous in your life, because this will be for your long-term benefit and happiness. And then you will say, sadhu. And because it comes from a place of compassion, because it comes from a place where you feel that the Buddha has your best interest at heart, you listen in a way you never listened before. And you take it in. You understand this as a real admonishment, which really does lead to your own happiness and to the happiness of everyone around you. And so you do it. You become generous, you become kind, and you do this with a full heart, really wanting to do these things. And then you gain the great benefits of that kindness. And then when you sit down to meditate, of course you feel happy. You recall the Buddha, you think, wow, it's amazing that such a being exists in the world. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being there. And of course, when you think about the Buddha in this way, what happens is that all your qualities of greed, hate, and delusion, they dissipate, they disappear, because you're in the presence of the Dhamma. You understand a bigger thing, a larger picture. You understand a little bit about where real happiness is to be found. And so you abandon these defilements. They just can't survive in the presence of that Dhamma, which is so powerful. And then when you don't have these qualities in your mind becomes steady, straight, unswerving, yeah, merely by remembering the Buddha. And when the mind is unswerving and steady based on the Buddha, then you find inspiration. You feel inspired. You feel, wow, in the Dhamma, the teaching of the Buddha, in the meaning is the goal, it's the purpose, it's the understanding of where these teachings are leading you. This is what this is about. You feel inspired by that. You think, wow, this is leading towards happiness, to the end of suffering, to real meaning, real purpose. Finally, some real meaning. Finally, the end of all kind of despair and sadness. This is the real deal. And you feel really so inspired by it. And when you feel inspired, you feel glad, because inspiration, the Pali word here is Veda. Inspiration means a mixture of understanding and feeling. Just like in English, in Pali, the word Veda has this mixture of understanding and feeling, just like inspiration is a mixture of feeling and understanding. So you understand the Dhamma, which takes you to a certain goal, the meaning, and you understand what it is all about. And because you are inspired, because you feel that gladness, then the rapture comes. And as you practice in this way, and now maybe you are back on your breath already, watching your breath, bringing these beautiful qualities with you, the rapture leads to tranquility. Tranquility leads to bliss. The bliss leads to the stillness of the mind. And then you are in balance amid an unbalanced population. You are untroubled, living among a troubled population in the world, because you are at ease. You don't have these defilements of the mind. Your mind is even and straight and powerful because the mindfulness and the samadhi are so strong. So this is how it comes about. And it's all about using your mind, thinking about the Buddha, thinking about these things in the right way. And when you do that, you will be inspired as a consequence. Let's go on to the next one. Furthermore, a noble disciple recollects the teaching. The teaching is well explained by the Buddha, visible in this very life, immediately effective, inviting inspection, relevant, so that sensible people can know it for themselves. When a noble disciple recollects the teaching, the mind is not full of greed, hate, and delusion. This is called a noble disciple who lives in balance among people that are unbalanced, who lives untroubled among people who are untroubled. They have entered the stream of the teaching and developed the recollection of the teaching. So here is a slightly different way of approaching this. Here you think about the teaching that we have, these beautiful teachings that lead you in one direction only, that are very well explained by the Buddha, and that they lead to immediate results. You can feel the results straight away. When you practice in the right way with kindness, straight away you feel better about yourself. Immediately these things have a result. You feel more peaceful. And they invite inspection in the sense that you can see that they work for you, relevant, so that sensible people can know them for themselves in this very life, right here and now. And when you know that you are in the presence of these kind of teachings, teaching with these powerful effects, teachings that actually lead you to a real place, a real goal, where you actually want to go, and you know it is right for you, again, you feel a sense of elation. You feel inspired. Wow, I'm so lucky to have these suttas. I'm so lucky to have the Buddha as my teacher who taught these things. And again, the inspiration happens in the same way. And then this whole process of meditation happens when you watch the breath, etc. Let's have a look at the next one. Furthermore, a noble disciple recollects the Sangha. The Sangha of the Buddha's disciples is practicing the way that is good, direct, methodical, and proper. It consists of the 4 pairs, the 8 individuals. This is the Sangha of the Buddha's disciples that is worthy of offerings, dedicated to the gods, worthy of hospitality, worthy of religious donations, worthy of greeting with joined palms, and is the supreme field of merit for the world. When a noble disciple recollects the Sangha, the mind is not full of greed, hate, and delusion. This is called the noble disciple who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, who lives untroubled among people who are troubled. They have entered the stream of the teaching and developed the recollection of the Sangha. So the Sangha, these are the people who are the noble ones. These are the people who see the teaching of the Buddha in the same way as the Buddha, who understand what this Dhamma is about. And they don't actually need the suttas anymore because it's like the book is already inside of them. They have made that book their own inside their own minds. And that is why they are practicing the good way, the direct, methodical, and proper way, because they know exactly what they are doing. And there is no doubt about them anymore. And this makes them able to teach others, makes them able to tell you the meaning of the suttas, because they understand what is going on with these suttas. So this is the noble Sangha. This is the proof that the Dhamma works, that other people are attaining the same thing. And it's wonderful to be able to meet people like this in your own life. It's wonderful if you have a chance to meet people who have these noble qualities, because, as I said before, it opens your eyes. You start to see the world in an entirely new way. You see, wow, is this possible? Is it possible to be like this? Is it possible to have always a sense of kindness and care, never to get angry, never to show any greed? always to have a clarity, always to have a bright mind that some of these people actually do have. Is that possible? And when you see that, it opens your eyes to another possibility, another dimension of existence that you never see in ordinary life. In ordinary life, you just see ordinary people doing the ordinary things. And sometimes you have to step out of the ordinary world to see something superior, something profound, something very beautiful. That is what you see with these noble people. And this is why they're called the 4 pairs and the 8 individuals, the noble people. They are worthy of offerings. They're worthy of hospitality and donations and greetings with joint palms, because they are the teachers. They have the ability to give you the highest happiness. So just like you honor any teacher in the world, we honor the teachers that have the understanding of the Dhamma even more, because they can give us the highest happiness. An ordinary teacher in the world can give you a little bit. They can give you an understanding to enable you to make a living and to function in the world. But only the noble ones can give you access to the real happiness of the path, the profound meaning of life that the Dhamma is able to guide you towards. So these are then worthy of special respect, basically. That is what it is saying here. So who are these noble ones? Well, you're going to have to look for yourself, and sometimes you meet them. But even just the idea of the noble ones, even the idea that these people exist, and I have no doubt that they exist in the world, even that idea is sufficient to make you feel inspired. And when you feel inspired just by thinking of these noble individuals, again, this whole thing takes off. You watch the breath, and then, oh, lo and behold, all of these good qualities come out as a consequence. Let's go to the next one. Furthermore, a noble disciple recollects their own ethical conduct, which is unbroken, impeccable, spotless, unmarred, liberating, praised by sensible people, not mistaken, and leading to immersion. When a noble disciple recollects their ethical conduct, the mind is not full of greed, hate, and delusion, etc., etc. This is called a noble disciple who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, and lives untroubled among people who are troubled. They've entered the stream of the teaching and developed the recollection of ethics. So here we have this idea, and this is, I think, one of the ways that this recollection may happen the most easy. Yeah, when we live really well, we live with kindness, we do all the things that we're supposed to do. We even think with kindness. And when we think with kindness, when our entire being becomes a vehicle to live in a kind way, that is what it means, the idea of the ethics are unbroken, they are impeccable, they are spotless, they are unmarred, yeah, they are liberating. Buddhisa, liberating. Yeah, this is one of those important ideas that when you live ethically, that is when you are liberated. It is not that the ethics are confining you and stopping you from expressing yourself. It is the other way around. Because it is the negative things, the negative qualities that trap us. When you have a negative quality in your mind, when you live in a negative way, your mind becomes small, your mind becomes trapped, your mind becomes affected by defilements that make you caught in those defilements. Your mind feels imprisoned. But when you abandon these kind of qualities, that is when you feel liberated. Your mind expands, it goes out into the world, and you feel free within that. Externally, maybe you look as if you have limitations on what you can do. But on the mental side of things, you are liberated because of this ethical conduct. Your mind feels free as a consequence of this. It is praised by sensible people. If you want to be praised by anyone, surely it is by sensible people you want to be praised. It is not mistaken. Actually, I think that is a wrong translation. I think it should mean it is not grasped. You don't grasp this kind of ethics, or this kind of morality, because it is natural. You don't have to grasp it anymore, especially when you are a noble one. No need to grasp these things. And it leads to samadhi. It leads to immersion. It leads to stillness. Again, this idea that ethics always leads to stillness. Good conduct, kindness always leads to stillness. It's very fascinating once you start to look at the suttas. You find it everywhere. It is such a common theme in the suttas to see this. So when you do your meditation, sometimes you don't have to recall this with any great force or anything. It's not as if you have to try to remember your ethics. You can just think back, wow, I've been living on the 5 precepts for a long time. Sometimes I live on the 8 precepts. Sometimes I live on the monastic precepts, whatever it is. And you just feel good about that. But sometimes it is just a natural feeling within you that you feel good about your conduct. You have this warm feeling within, a warm feeling because you know deep inside that you are a person worthy of respect for your good conduct. You have a sense of self-esteem, a sense of self-worth, because good conduct leads to self-worth. You just feel good about yourself. You will see that the people who are Aryas in the world, the noble ones, they don't brag. They don't say, here I am, I'm a good person. But still, they have a sense of self-worth. They have a sense of that they know that they are good people. And you can tell that when you are in the presence of a noble one, you feel that they have that sense of self-worth. They don't put themselves down. They don't kind of belittle themselves, but nor do they praise themselves and raise themselves up. They have this evenness of kindness. They have a humility, but at the same time also a solidity about them that is very powerful. So in your meditation, just allow these good feelings to arise. Allow them to arise because you know that you are a worthy person. And then as you allow them to arise, maybe with a little bit of help, a little bit of support, by leaning your mind towards that, just very gently reminding yourself of your good conduct, the way you have lived your life in a good way, that warm feeling comes inside. The gladness arises inside. Then, of course, comes the rapture. From the rapture comes the tranquility. From the tranquility comes the sukha, the bliss that we experience on this path. And then comes the immersion, the samadhi, arising out of the simple fact that you live really, really well as a human being. You live with all of these marvelous qualities. We have just looked at the ethical conduct, so let's move on to the next one. Furthermore, a noble disciple recollects their own generosity. I am so fortunate, so very fortunate. Among people full of the stain of stinginess, I live at home, rid of stinginess, freely generous, open-hearted, loving to let go, committed to charity, loving to give and to share. When a noble disciple recollects their own generosity, the mind is not full of greed, hate, and delusion. And then all the happiness of the path comes in, and then samadhi is attained. This is called the noble disciple who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, who lives untroubled among people who are troubled. They have entered the stream of the teaching and developed the recollection of generosity. This is called the chaga nusati in Pali. And it is so beautifully phrased. It starts off by saying that I am fortunate. I'm really, really fortunate to not be stingy, to actually be generous. How lucky I am. I look out into the world and I see how stingy other people are, and you think, and your thinking is not that I have to give, and these other people are stingy, that's really unfair. It's actually the opposite. It is the people who are stingy who are losing out. They are losing out on a much higher happiness, the happiness of generosity. If you are stingy, it is like you are enclosed in your own little world, as I was saying before. You're fearful of the world outside, holding on to your possessions, afraid other people or society is going to take it. That is a small world. It's a world where the mind is cramped and unpleasant. But the person who is generous is someone who embraces the world, embraces other people, in a large way. So it is a much, much greater happiness to gain that mental happiness that comes from generosity than to have that small happiness that comes from owning things, owning more things. So you are actually fortunate to be generous. And that means also, when you think about it in that way, you don't look down upon other people who are stingy. You don't think, yeah, I am great, I am generous. These other people, yeah, they are just really bad people. They are stingy, the misers, the dodgy people of the world. You never think like that because you realize actually you are the fortunate one. And you have compassion for the stingy people because you know they're actually losing out. And you want to help them. You want to show them how to be generous just like you are. So among the stingy people in the world, you are freely generous, open-handed, loving to let go, committed to charity, loving to give and share. This idea that you give everywhere. There's no place in the world where you don't want to give. Yes, maybe you give to Buddhist causes, but actually you give to everyone. You give to, regardless of the background, even to an animal maybe. The idea of giving and always giving of yourself because you know the power of that. You never want to stop giving. You take any opportunity that you can have. That is the right way of giving. Seeing the possibility. Whenever you see the possibility, you share with someone else. And you take this to the point where you share with animals and you share any kind of tiny opportunity that you have to share with someone. Like the Buddha says in the Suttas, that even if you have just a little bit of food scraps left in your bowl after eating, he's talking to the monks, and you throw out the dirty dishwashing or bowl washing water. If you think when you throw out the bowl washing water, may the little beings, may the little insects who feed on such food, may they eat this food, may they be happy. You're already being generous and you're already creating happiness for yourself. So this is this idea, and as you keep on giving, it is like sometimes you have this feeling that your entire being, your heart is kind of opening up to the whole world around you. And when you feel that you're opening up and you want to be generous to everyone, it's a very beautiful feeling. And you know that this is a true spiritual feeling when you feel that, because it has this purity about it. It has this happiness about it, this gladness about it, this peace about it. All the qualities are good qualities. You recognize it straight away as something very, very powerful and very beautiful and very inspirational. So this is the idea of being generous, giving whenever you have the opportunity, never holding back. This is what you find in the suttas. Anyone who enters a deep state of samadhi or becomes a stream enterer, actually becoming an arya, they are fully generous. If you're not fully generous, there is no way you can enter a jhana state, nor is there any way you can become a stream enterer. You have to give, give, give. This is how you recognize the aryas in the world, by how much they give. And then again, if you think like this, then when you sit down in your meditation and you will recall your generosity, either one act of generosity that was very powerful or the very fact, the general fact that you are generous, then you feel happiness again, gladness. You feel inspired in the Dhamma and the meaning, the purpose of this, where this is leading. It's leading to even more happiness. And then you are called a disciple who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, and troubled among people who are troubled. You have entered the stream of the teaching. This is again talking about the noble ones, the Aryas, especially when this is fully actuated, this idea of generosity. So again, this leads to samadhi down the track. Let's look at the next one. This is the last one of these recollections. Furthermore, a noble disciple recollects the deities, the devas. There are the gods of the 4 great kings, the gods of the 33, the Yama gods, the joyful gods, the gods who love to create, and the gods who control the creations of others, the gods of Brahma's host, and gods even higher than these. When those deities passed away from here, they were reborn there because of their faith, their ethics, their learning, their generosity and wisdom. I too have that same kind of faith, ethics, learning, generosity and wisdom. When a noble disciple recollects the faith, ethics, learning, generosity and wisdom of both themselves and the deities, their mind is not full of greed, hate and delusion. At that time, their mind is unswerving, based on the deities. A noble disciple whose mind is unswerving finds inspiration and meaning in the teaching, and finds joy connected with the teaching. When the joyful rapture springs up, when the mind is full of rapture, the body becomes tranquil. When the body is tranquil, you feel bliss. And when you're blissful, the mind becomes stilled in samadhi. This is called a noble disciple who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, who lives untroubled among people who are troubled. They've entered the stream of the teaching and developed the recollection of the deities. So I don't know if you find it easy to recall the deities, but you can imagine the deities as something they're very beautiful beings, and they are very full of light, yeah, and it's almost as if you can see the good qualities in the being because of what they look like. You can see all the beautiful qualities behind the facade, yeah, and so you know that these are very pure beings, and then you understand that I too am practicing in the same way. I too will be heading in that direction. That's essentially what you're thinking, yeah. And so you feel inspired by recalling these beings and knowing that you too have the same qualities. And then you feel joyful because you are part of these higher realms. And then this whole process again takes over. And then you gain samadhi on that basis. When a noble disciple has reached the fruit and understood the instruction, this is the kind of meditation they frequently practice. So try some of these teachings. There is also the more general teaching about remembering your Kalyana Mittas. Yeah, this is also found in the suttas, in the Anguttara 11s, I think. And that is a more general teaching about just thinking that you are so lucky to have Kalyana Mittas. These people in the world who want the best for you, who want to support you, yeah, whether it is the other lay people, or whether it is the monastics, or whether it is the Buddha, or whoever. But the fact that you have these Kalyana Mittas, you can rejoice in that, because you are so lucky to have such friends in the world. All right, so now we are getting close to the very end. And we're coming to the very last sutta on this retreat. It's amazing how it is the last sutta and we're coming down to the last 15 minutes. I don't know how this is possible. It seems to always work out. It's like magic. You read the suttas and then the end of the retreat comes, and the end of the sutta comes exactly at the end of the retreat. Not always, but usually it is like that. I don't know if it is some higher power in the universe that does this. That seems to be the way it works. So before time runs out, let's have a look at this very last sutta. Majjhima Nikaya, middle length saying 64, long discourse to Malunkhya Putta, or Malunkhya. And this is only a very short extract from quite a long sutta. And the idea now is that we have just looked at all the meditation that leads all the way up to the jhana states, how to attain samadhi. And this very last part here, it shows us how insight is practiced. We have looked a little bit at insight already. We looked at the end of the Anapanasati Sutta, how you use the ideas of impermanence, of fading away, of cessation, and then letting go. Yeah, we had a look at that. And this sutta, kind of, the last sutta here, it sort of expands a little bit on that idea, yeah, on how this actually works. And it's quite an interesting sutta in a number of ways. So let's have a look at this as the very last thing that we do on this retreat before we do the last Q&A session. So this is what the Buddha has to say. There is a path and a practice for the giving up of the 5 lower fetters. These are the things that bind us to samsara, that stops us from being an anagami, a non-returner. It is not possible to know or see or give up the 5 lower fetters without relying on that path and that practice. Yes, that's kind of interesting. What can that be? What is that path that you have to rely on? Suppose there was a large tree standing with heartwood. It is not possible to cut out the heartwood without having cut through the bark and the softwood. In the same way, there is a path and practice for giving up the 5 lower fetters. It is not possible to know or see or give up the 5 lower fetters without relying on that path and that practice. Yeah, so this is very clear that you have to do this practice in order to become a non-returner, an anagami. So what do you think that path is? Now, what is very interesting is that path is basically the jhanas. Yeah? So the Buddha is saying that it isn't possible to become a non-returner or an anagami without practicing the jhana. These are an essential aspect of that path. So you have to practice those jhanas. That is quite interesting. And then, of course, when you come out of the jhanas, what do you do then? This is what this sutta is about. So let's see what the Buddha has to say. And what, Ananda, is the path, the practice for giving up the 5 lower fetters? It is when a mendicant, due to seclusion from attachments, the giving up of unskillful qualities, and the complete settling of physical discomfort, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome qualities, enters and remains in the first absorption, which has the rapture of bliss, rapture and bliss born of seclusion, of placing the mind and keeping it connected. That is the description of the first jhana, the standard one. This is a little bit different one here, but essentially it is the description of the suttas of the first jhana. So you enter the first jhana, you enter this deep state of samadhi, then what do? And this is where the insight comes, yeah? And one of the reasons why the jhanas, there's many reasons why the jhanas are so powerful, but one of the reasons why they are so powerful is because you have already abandoned so much, yeah? It says the standard way that the jhanas are explained, it says you have given up the 5 senses, vivicheva kamehi. And because you have given up the 5 senses and the body, and you have essentially given up the will, you have given up the 5 hindrances, there is very little left to be given up. All that is really left to be given up is that experience that you have inside that jhana. And what is that experience? Well, basically, it's just bliss. It's a particular kind of bliss, the bliss of seclusion. That is all that remains in your consciousness. That is all that remains in your whole world. So it's a very small thing to give up at the very end. Almost everything else has been given up. There's a very simple remnant of the world that remains. And now you have to give that up. How do you do that? So this is why it is relatively easy, because you have already simplified things so much by giving up so much. Also because you have given up the hindrances that distort your mental outlook, and also because you have developed a mind that is powerful, that can penetrate, that is stable, that can stay with the object. All of these things help to enable insight to happen. So this is how you do it. They contemplate the phenomena there, that which is included in form, in feeling, in perception, in choices and consciousness. You contemplate it as impermanent, as suffering, as a disease, as a boil, as a dart, as misery, as an affliction, as alien, as falling apart, as empty, as non-self. They turn their mind away from those things and apply it to the deathless element. This is peaceful, this is sublime. That is the stilling of all activities, the letting go of all attachments, the ending of craving, cessation, and extinguishment. Abiding in that, they attain the ending of the defilements. If they don't attain the ending of defilements, with the ending of the 5 lower fetters, they are reborn spontaneously because of their passion and love for that meditation. They are extinguished there and are not liable to return from that world. This is the path and practice for the giving up of the 5 lower fetters. So here we are coming to the very end of the path. And I always think it is nice to take the path of meditation all the way to the very end to understand what is happening at this particular point. So what you do here is that you look at those phenomena inside the first jhana state, yeah? And those phenomena inside the first jhana state, well, there will be an aspect of form, feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness. Whatever is left of those things, that is what you look at that particular time. And of course, the form aspect of the first jhana is a very refined aspect of your perception. You're perceiving something which is still related, a remnant from the 5 senses. There is the feeling there, a very blissful kind of feeling that you have when you come to this particular state. Yeah, there is the feelings there, very positive. The perception is basically also just the bliss. The choices at this point is just the very small movement of the mind in the first jhana, and the consciousness is the awareness. Yeah, so however the 5 aggregates appear within the first jhana, that is what you are contemplating. How do you contemplate it? As impermanent. Yeah, you know you cannot sustain this. You know it is going to change. It will not last forever. And because you know it is impermanent, because you know it is falling apart, you know it is suffering to try to hold on to it. You cannot hold on to it because it will always be changed. It always ends in tears because you have to come out of these things. Yeah, you want them to last forever. This is the greatest happiness you have ever experienced in your life. And now you have to give it up. That's really hard to deal with. So in a sense, that state too is suffering because of that. It is a disease, a boil, a dart, a misery, and an affliction. Even though it is the greatest happiness you have ever had, you have to see it as an affliction because it is impermanent. You cannot control it. Because you cannot control it, ultimately it is non-self. You're not going to go to the jhana realm forever after you die. After you die, instead, you are going to go wherever your karma takes you. Maybe to the jhana realm for a while, and then reborn somewhere else. You cannot control it. It is not self. Ultimately, it is empty. It is alien, even, as it says here. And when you understand that even the most powerful blisses in the universe that can be experienced by a human being, even that ultimately is out of control. Ultimately, you cannot control it. The mind turns away from those things, and they apply themselves to the deathless element, the liberation from all death, the freedom from death, the realization that extinguishment is the highest happiness. This is peaceful. This is sublime. The stilling of all sankharas, no more activity in the mind, the giving up of all attachments, the ending of everything, the cessation and craving, and the final extinguishment. And abiding in that is where either you become an anagami or you become a full arahant as a consequence. That is where these fetters come to an end. So this is kind of the powerful insights at the very, very end of the path. And it's all based, as you can see here, all based on seeing the 5 aggregates as afflicted by the 3 characteristics. That whole sequence, starting with impermanent and being non-self, is just an expansion on the ordinary three characteristics: impermanence, suffering, and non-self. And the jhanas is just one particular way that the khandhas manifest. So you apply those three characteristics to the five khandhas. And when you see that they are affected by these three characteristics, that is when you make that great breakthrough. And eventually you become fully enlightened as a consequence. So this is the path all the way to the end, how it works. So let's finish the sutta off. Only one more paragraph. Okay, that's really good timing, because it's coming to an end. So furthermore, as the placing of the mind and keeping it connected are stilled, a monastic, a layperson, an upasika, an upasaka enters and remains in the second absorption, the third absorption, the fourth absorption, the fourth jhana. They contemplate the phenomena there as impermanent, as suffering, as diseased, as a boil, as a dart, as a misery, as an affliction, as alien, as falling apart, as empty, as non-self. They turn their mind away from those things and apply it to the deathless element. This is peaceful, this is sublime. That is the stilling of all activities, the letting go of all attachments, the ending of craving, cessation and extinguishment. Abiding in that, they attain the ending of defilements. And if they don't attain the ending of defilements, with the ending of the five lower fetters, they are reborn spontaneously because of the passion and love for that meditation. They are extinguished there and are not liable to return from that world. This is the path and practice for the giving up of the five lower fetters. So there you are. This is how you become an anagami or an arahant. Yeah, it's very simple. It's not very hard. One of the things that I always remember is when you meet some of these amazing people in the world, and many of them happen to be monks, because when you are a monk yourself, you meet many amazing monks. And then when you meet them, you say, oh, it is so difficult. Yeah, meditation, whoa, so hard to meditate. And they say meditation is the easiest things in the world. And then you say, oh, it's so hard to attain the jhanas. They say attaining the jhanas is the easiest thing in the world. And you say it's so difficult to become a streamer, to an arahant. They say it's the easiest thing in the world. And the reason why it is hard is because all of these things are blocking us in a certain way. There are all these blockages on the path. But actually, the seeing of these things, the allowing of the path to unfold, actually the path is very easy. It goes by itself. We are standing in the way. We are making the problems on this path. But by letting go, by just turning our mind in the right direction, ultimately by having right view, by looking at the world in the right way, the path just unfolds. None of these things are difficult. It is just that we are making the blockages to all of these things. So this is the path of meditation according to the Buddha. This is how the Buddha teaches meditation. It really is about preparing the mind in the right way, having the right view, having the right sila, the right ethics, and all of these kind of things. And as you have the right sila and the right ethics, and put an enormous amount of effort into ethics, remember kindness. Remember that kindness is incredibly profound. Kindness has to do with our entire being, with our habits, with how we think, with how we perceive the world. It goes to the very core of what we are as human beings. It's a very profound thing. Don't underestimate the power of kindness. Develop that fully. When you develop that fully, the meditation becomes so much more easy because your mindfulness is already established. And when your mindfulness is established, all you have to do is follow the breath. That fulfills satipatthana practice. You don't have to make it complicated. You don't have to draw in all of these various ways of meditating. The Buddha's way is mindfulness of breathing. The only thing in the suttas that fulfills satipatthana is mindfulness of breathing. Nothing else is spoken of in those terms. It's wonderful, isn't it? It makes it so simple. You follow the mindfulness of breathing. You take it all the way through the wonderful blisses, the beautiful pieces of the path, becoming more and more powerful. You're building it up until one day you attain the jhana states. And when you attain the jhana states, all you have to do is turn your mind, understanding that even they cannot be controlled. And then one day, hopefully, every one of us will be an anagami and an arahant. That is the idea. That is the path. Good luck with the practice.